Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to John.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. This is the testimony given by John when the people sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the temple leaders. They asked him, "Why then are you baptizing if you're neither the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" And John answered them, "I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." This took place in Bethany, across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The Gospel of our Savior.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Some of our fondest Christmas memories take place in the kitchen, right? They take place in the kitchen. A friend of mine, Elizabeth, recalls as a very young child being invited in by her immigrant neighbors to bake their traditional Norwegian crumb doesn't sound good. Crumb cake. I'll just call it crumb cake. You speak Norwegian, Betsy? I feel like we might. Do you know how to say it? No. Okay. Tell us. Crumb. Sorry, that's the real pronunciation. And so she said the house smelled like cardamom, the smell she'd never smelled before, and she would enter in and they would get her working on this really lovely traditional Norwegian treat. Another friend of mine, Mayala, remembers the age she was when she was old enough to be allowed in the kitchen, in her mother's kitchen, to break the eggs for rompopo, a Honduran eggnog type drink. And then she was old enough to tie the ribbons on the jars and put the labels on as well before they shared it with friends. So I'm going to ask you this morning, what are you making in your kitchens? What's passed down in your kitchen from generation to generation? What do you remember going into a kitchen and making as a child, if you were allowed and invited in? Do you have any memories of that? Children, are you making anything in the kitchen for Christmas? Anybody? What are we making in the kitchen? Go ahead, Caleb.
Lots of cookies.
Lots of cookies. Yes, Elliot.
Gingerbread man.
Gingerbread man. Very good. Yes.
Really chocolatey cookies.
Really chocolatey cookies. Anybody else making cookies? All right, Cole, what kind of cookies? It's making me hungry.
Black bottom cupcakes.
One more time?
Black bottom cupcakes.
Is that like a brownie on the bottom? Oh my goodness. Sounds delicious. I like some of these traditions very much. Do we have any others, Madeline or Kit, in your family? What do you like to eat at Christmas? Cookies, right? I think we're on a cookie streak. Any other good recipes? Anybody still doing fruitcake? I know I got one of those. All right, anybody doing a traditional Anybody? You had to do that in October, I think. And then soak it. Anything else from your? Yes, Amy.
Gingerbread with hard lemon sauce.
Yes. Hard or hot?
Well, it's hot, but it's hard because it's solidified.
Got it. Okay. Got it. I'll make sure I understood that recipe. I see Robert.
Fudge.
You make some very good fudge in at least 4 flavors. Yes, Gloria. Christmas stolen. There's another generational tree. German? A nice German tradition, I think. Please, Martha.
I make roll-out cookies. It's my grandmother's recipe. It's got nutmeg in it.
Ooh, like a sugar cookie with nutmeg. Yeah, you smell that, you know it's the season, right? Those smells, those feelings. One more, anyone? Please, Caroline. One more time?
Molasses.
Molasses cookies. I thought it was a foreign word at first, but I know molasses. That's in my language. Molasses cookies. Molasses is another smell I don't smell any other time of the year. There are certain smells and textures that just go with this season. In the kitchen preparations before the Christmas holiday, we get in there to make something good to eat, but listen to me clearly, children. You will learn over time that what we're doing in the kitchen is not only stirring up cookies or black-bottom cupcakes or stolen. We are stirring up solidarity. We are stirring up love. We are stirring up cultural connections, family traditions, warm hospitality, and that deep desire to share things in our lives that are good with those we love. As we grow older, we figure out how challenging it was for those older folks in our household to include us in the kitchen, don't we? The older we get, the more we realize that while we were excitedly breaking eggs for Rome Popo, somebody was coming in behind us and pulling out some eggshells, right? It's a lot of work to include the younger generations in these traditions. It's a lot of work. It makes it take a little extra time, and maybe there's an eggshell in it. And it's worth it, isn't it? To include the younger generations. So I want you to imagine with me on this foggy Maryland late fall morning, I want you to imagine being in Honduras, where the landscape looks pretty different. Where our congregation goes in Honduras is Tegucigalpa to El Hogar, which is short for El Hogar de Amor y Esperanza. That's a lot to get out. That means the home of love and hope. And when we get there, we fly into a city that's made up of all these mountains because it was a silver mining area that grew into this colonial city. So imagine getting to Honduras, the landscape is really different than here. And imagine you arrive and you don't know how this trip is going to be, and they usher you into the kitchen at El Hogar, and you see for the first time Doña Antonia. Doña Antonia is like an institution at El Hogar. She lived across the street when these lovely folks that wanted to build a school, mostly American and Canadian Episcopal Anglican folks, they pulled children off the street and wanted to educate them in 1979. And then they bought this piece of property in the city. And this woman across the street came in and said, I can cook. And Doña Antonia, starting in the early 80s, has been cooking there ever since. Right? So you would come into this kitchen, and along with her staff, which now includes sometimes the mother of a student or an older student, you would enjoy tortillas and rice and beans and this soft cheese that I only get in Honduras and a nice salad. All this food made in her kitchen with love arrives so that when we are welcome there, we eat together first the food of Doña Antonia. In her kitchen, Doña Antonia, who, she definitely is running the kitchen. If you just stand there for a minute, you've got that figured out. She is very much in charge of the whole kitchen. Big bowls, big pots and pans. And in that kitchen, in that big kitchen, she brings in children and gives them directions on how to help. It used to not be like that. She used to, along with the staff, keep the children safely out of the kitchen for safety reasons. But now they incorporate the children more and more, because one thing that we have come to understand about our ministry in Honduras is that children who grow up on the street or in really difficult circumstances don't know how to cook for themselves. And it's wonderful that they're eating good food. Doni and Donia is teaching them how to cook it. It's a whole new day, isn't it? So in addition to that very big kitchen near the dining room space, they have added another bread kitchen to the campus. For those of you that haven't been there in a while, it was the old library. The old library, this like outbuilding, was transformed into a special kitchen just to make bread. The space was designed for children, so the counters are a little low, which makes sense when you go in and see the children working in there. They come in off the playground. Now the playground is an especially noisy place. In a noisy city with cars honking and the sound of engines all around, the noise on the playground at times is just like deafening. They're so excited and playing. The kids come into the bread kitchen and they go silent. They're very reverent as they prepare food. They come in and they wash their hands clean. They roll up their sleeves and they go and they put their little hands into these big containers of bread flour, and they measure out the right amount and they follow the recipe, and then they wait and wait and wait for the bread to rise, and they wait and wait for it to be ready. And then imagine these children who had been living in really difficult circumstances then take the bread that they have baked and walk over to Donia and Donia and present their bread in the kitchen for the other students to enjoy for dinner. It's a beautiful thing, a really beautiful thing. These are children who know the value of a loaf of bread, not monetarily, but in their heart. They understand that a loaf of bread would mean that a family could survive another day or two. They understand that from experience. So they carry that bread forward with such reverence and appreciation that it stops me in my tracks, the way I take for granted the good food in my life. Doña Antonia, the staff, the teachers, the students at El Hogar are stirring up in their community this sense of being fed and cared for and caring for one another. They are stirring up in their community a sense of belonging that leads them to dare to hope. To hope, a hope that is as real as the yeasty smell escaping from the ovens. In an office toward the front of the complex, away from the kitchens, is the director, the executive director of El Hogar, in her office, Denise Vargas. She is Honduran born and studied at Dartmouth University in New Hampshire, so she really straddles the world of English speakers and Spanish speakers so beautifully. In that office, it doesn't look like a kitchen or smell like a kitchen, and yet she is in there stirring things up for the children and community of El Hogar. She has stirred up the ways we understand education in that place. The way we do this kind of ministry with people who are socioeconomically challenged. She is stirring up the system and inviting staff and board members like our own Denise Sharp, chair of the board. She's inviting donors and interested people to examine how we engage this work most faithfully. Not because it makes donors feel better, but because it changes the lives of children for good. She has moved us away of adopting a child, because donors really like that program. She has moved us away from that transactional child model to understanding that we're supporting a whole system. A system where children are educated and fed, a system that not only supports a child, but their mother, and sometimes a father, so that others are being fed and enriched as well. Denise continues to write and rewrite the recipes for our ministry in El Hogar with this abiding commitment to changing lives, generating hope, even if it means it's really messy and some eggshells need to be pulled out later, right? It's going to change the country. It's going to change what's going on in Honduras. She's a native of that country, and along with her staff, she understands that there's a certain way to support the development and education of children and their families so that it benefits the whole nation. It benefits that part of the world that for so long, people from the north just came in and took out the good stuff, the silver, and just left the dregs for the people there. She's changing our perception of how we do ministry. In Luke's gospel, which we hear today as a canticle, we hear the voice of Mary, the mother of Jesus, calling out to God in song, giving voice to her hope that God will use the birth of this child to stir up hope in hopeless times, as God has always done for God's people. Mary sings out a song of rejoicing that imagines generations yet to come experiencing the loving kindness of God, the justice of God. She sings out a song that prepares for us what God is going to do by breaking into the world in the form of Jesus. God is coming in the form of Jesus, friends, not to keep things cute and tidy, but to stir it up and stir it up some more until the recipe is right. God will scatter the proud in their conceit and cast down the mighty from their places of power while lifting up the lowly and filling the hungry with the good things for which they have longed. Stirring up the world sounds to some of us like a lot of fun, doesn't it? Some of us are like, let's do it, come on, let's go, let's stir it up. And some of you are like, no, thank you, thanks, that's fun. We've got to pay attention to that. Did you want to get in there and stir it up, or did you want to say no thanks? Stirring up the world is really messy work. It is really messy work, and we know that this one Mary is waiting for is coming to really stir things up, to stir up even conflicts between those who are in power and those who are lowly. Jesus will stir up our own ideas about being right or righteous and teach us new ways to live in this love together. Now, I'm personally in a moment in my life where I am very much stirred up and feeling like that stirring up is getting really messy. I am so stirred up that there's just stirred up word all over the place, right? On the one hand, I am wanting to prepare my heart and the congregation and my home and family for Christmas. I'm very focused on the holiday and stirring up all the things that need to happen to make the holiday a really beautiful one. And on the other hand, I'm very stirred up as I work with the leaders of these congregations, St. Paul's and St. Andrew's, to transition in clergy leadership. Those are two really different things, aren't they? And isn't that just like life? We come towards Christmas perhaps grieving. We come towards Christmas worried about something. We come towards Christmas with a health crisis in our heart. This is the season where things get a little messy on purpose and because life is a little messy. One of the things that I am really delighted about is the evidence all around me in this congregation of God's faithfulness in the midst of messiness, especially that kind of faithfulness that spans the generations. Last night I had the great joy of going to a concert. It was a good concert with lots of beautiful music, and the quality of the singing was really beautiful, wasn't it? For those of us who were able to be here, some of you really gave it your all, and you could have been on a stage much grander than the parish house at St. Andrew's. We're privileged to have such gifted musicians here. What was the most beautiful part of last night's concert for me was not the music, although it was really beautiful. It was the combination of Judy Garland, raise your hand if you know Judy Garland, and Mitski. Raise your hand if you know Mitski. Do you what's happening. Keep your hands up, look around. Okay, see what's happening? So, a lot of us know Jude Garland, but perhaps not the music of Minsky. That's a generational thing, that's knowledge that some of us just don't have. And last night, this congregation welcomed all kinds of music from across the generations. There was Freddie Mercury as well, Wallow, right? I mean, there was some really interesting younger music. The generations showed up, and in all of the glory of being an intergenerational community, we listened to one another sing that music, and it was welcomed, and we all belonged. And I had an abiding feeling in my heart that this is a place where we all belong. And as messy as life gets, that is something that gives me great hope, not only at Christmas, but all year long. Just as our neighbors or mothers or grandparents included us in their Christmas kitchen work, baking cookies, making things in the kitchen for Christmas, friends, God is also including us in God's kitchen. We are invited to get in there with reverence, to do the work of giving life to one another. God invites us into the kitchen to stir things up and then to bring it to one another, to share in that bread, to share in that wine, to give life to one another, to belong to one another.